Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Online with the CMC by any other name, NAF, the name authority file ins and outs. And Mary Cornell is going to start presenting. Go ahead, Mary.
Hello, all. Welcome to Online with the CMC. My name is Mary Cornell. Today, we will be discussing the NAF, or the name authority file. Firstly, the NAF, NACO, or the Name Authority Cooperative Program, allows participants, catalogers, and librarians to contribute to authority records for agents, places, works, and expressions. So just a little background about my own experience with NACO and the NAF for you all. I am very new to the NAF NACO creation. I've been a cataloger for several years, but I'm fresh from NACO training just this last February. I am joined today by colleagues with their own experience with the NAF to answer questions after my presentation. With that, let's get started. Our agenda today includes a few items. Firstly, we're going to look at what a name authority record could entail field by field. I'm also going to go over different types of name authority records as I go through breaking down the fields. So keep an ear out for that. Then I'll talk about NACO training and what catalogers need to go through in order to create name authority records, including some of my own impersonal insight. Lastly, I'm going to show you examples of some records. So first and foremost, what is the NAF? The Library of Congress Name Authority File provides authoritative data for names of persons, organizations, events, places, and titles. Its purpose is the identification of these entities and through the use of such controlled vocabulary to provide uniform access to bibliographic resources. This is just the first two sentences. The NAF also provides the controlled form of a name. For instance, think of Williams, John. How many different forms could that name come in? Library of Congress names includes over 8 million descriptions created over many decades, and according to different cataloging policies. LC Names is officially called the NACO Authority File and is a cooperative effort in which participants follow a common set of standards and guidelines. This is directly from the Library of Congress. So the NAF, why do we need it? The question comes about because one thing to remember is any catalog's purpose is to serve the patrons. By creating these controlled access points in the NAF, we as librarians can create consistency necessary to co-allocate bibliographic records for a group of items. The first example that came to mind for me was James Patterson. Now imagine if he didn't have an authorized access point. Then think of the hundreds of titles he's written or contributed to, and those records not having a standardized access point for him. Chaos, anyone? Our first consideration is fixed fields for an NAR or a name authority record. Most fixed field elements in authority records are either constants or system supplied. For instance, when you create a new record, the record status will be M as supplied by the system. The 4 fields that catalogers most frequently will need to pay attention to are: the first is rules, or the descriptive cataloging field. This could be coded as A, earlier rules, B, AACR1, C, AACR2, D, AACR2 compatible headings. None of these are currently used in newly created records. And then lastly, it could be coded Z for RDA. For this field, if creating a new record, you would code Z. Next, we have name or undifferentiated personal name, which could be coded A for differentiated personal name, or a name title entered under a personal name. B, undifferentiated personal name, or N for not applicable. Normally for this field, you would want to code A or N. Then we have ref status or reference evaluation. This could be coded as A, record includes cross references, so a 4XX or a 5XX, unless one or more is a non-Latin script. B, record includes unevaluated references. And then N, record includes no cross references. So most commonly, you might find this coded as A or N. And lastly, we have the authority status or level of establishment. This can be coded as A, fully established, C, provisional level, D, preliminary level. Okay, and more than likely, you're going to find that coded as A, fully established. Next, we have the 040 or the cataloging source field. This field can contain subfields A, B, C, D, and E. Subfield A contains the original cataloging agency. Subfield B is language of cataloging. Subfield C is the transcribing agency. Subfield D is the modifying agency, and subfield E is description conventions. As you see in my example, when creating a new record, subfield A and C are the same, as not only would you as the cataloger be creating the record, but you also would be acting as the transcriber. You would need to add a subfield E as you are creating the record. This is from a completed record, hence the subfield E is already in place. If another organization were to modify your record after creation, their organization code would be added in subfield D. I put the next two slides together, though slightly out of order because they both pertain to geographic material. The first, the 034, is coded cartographic mathematical data. The 034 contains geographic coordinate data for geographic entities. In other words, if you were creating a record for, say, Champaign, Illinois, you would use this field. The different subfields for this are subfield D, coordinates longitude, subfield E, coordinates easternmost longitude, subfield F, coordinates northernmost latitude, subfield G, coordinates southernmost latitude, subfield J, declination northern limit, subfield K, declination southern limit, and then there are many other subfields that also include different ways that you can break down this field. But you also have at the end of this a source code 2, subfield 2 that includes your source code. The coordinates may be recorded in either degrees, minutes, seconds, decimal degrees, decimal minutes, and or decimal seconds. Styles should not be mixed in a single 034 field, but the field may be repeated to represent the different styles. The order of the 034 fields when both styles are given does not matter. The example is from Champaign, Illinois. As seen in subfield D, we have the westernmost longitude of Champaign, and subfield E, the easternmost longitude, and subfield F, the northernmost latitude, and subfield G, the southernmost, and the subfield 2 uses the source code. Our next geographic field is the 043, or the geographic area code. The 043 field contains geographic area codes for areas associated with a geographic name in a 151 field. The different subfields are subfield A, geographic area code, or the GAC, and subfield B, the local GAC code, and lastly, subfield C, the ISO code. Say you're creating a new record for the town Albion, Michigan. Your 043 field would read as you see it, in-US-MI in a subfield A. Our next field is the 046 for special coded dates field. When encoding
Mary, we can't hear you. Did you accidentally mute yourself maybe, or turn your volume down? Mary, can you hear me? Hang on, guys. We'll try to figure out what's going on.
Okay. Alrighty. So we will start at the beginning of this one. I apologize, everyone. There's a lot of information. So, all right. So the next field is the 046 or the special coded dates field. When encoding information, give the fullest information about the date that is readily available. The date in field 046 may be more precise than the date is used in the authorized access point. If, for instance, an author's birth date and death date, including month, day, and year, this would be considered the fullest information. When revising existing authority records, record dates in field 046, even if the authorized access point does not include dates, if the information is readily available. When recording dates in field 046, use the extended date time format, EDTF. Okay, so the subfields for this field are subfield F, birth date, subfield G, death date, subfield K, beginning or single date created, subfield L, ending date created, subfield O, single or starting date for aggregated content, subfield P, ending date for aggregated content, subfield Q, establishing date, subfield R, termination date, subfield S, start period, subfield T, end period, subfield U, uniform resource identifier, and subfield V, source of information. The example we have here is for this field is Maya Angelou's 046. And subfield F, we have that Angelou was born April 4th, 1928. And subfield G, we have that she died on May 28th, 2014. All right. Our next field is the 053 or the LC classification number. NACO participants can use this field to record literature class numbers other than children's literature for a personal name access point for an author. This field should not be assigned to an undifferentiated name. So if you have, say, Smith, John, if you can't find a way to make him differentiated, birthplace, say for his birthplace or some other way, do not use 053 for the record. Only LC verified class numbers have a second indicator 0. All else will have a second indicator 4. This is a repeatable field. The subfields are as follows. A, classification numbers, element, single number, or beginning number of span. Subfield B, classification number, element, ending number of span. Subfield C, explanatory term, and subfield 5, institution number, institution to which field applies. Paul McCartney has 2 LC classification numbers, as not only is he a songwriter, composer, musician, as shown in his second LC number, but he also has written an autobiography, children's books, and recipe books. All right, our next field is the 1XX, or the authorized access point field. There is no prescribed mark order for the subfields beyond subfield A. Subfield D should always be the last element in the field unless the subfield C spirit is included. If such, that would be the last element. Subfield Q can be included for a fuller form of name. For instance, if you have an author who uses initials for their name, it can be shown what those initials equate to. And subfield Q, think, say, C.S. Lewis, whose full name is actually Clive Staples Lewis. So that would be his fuller form of name. In subfield C, profession can be displayed. If someone is a prolific romance writer, that can be utilized as a subfield C element. The example in my slide here shows a conference access point that was created for the American Library Association's annual conference. All right. So we're going into what NACO calls other attributes. These fields are optional. If you have information you can add into these fields to assist in disambiguating your NAF, it is encouraged. The first field is the 368 or other attributes of person or corporate body. Any attribute that serves to characterize a person or a corporate body, or that may be needed for differentiation from other persons or corporate bodies, and for which separate content designation is not already defined. The subfields in this can include subfield A, type of corporate body, subfield B, type of jurisdiction, subfield C, other jurisdiction, other designation, subfield D, title of person, and subfield S and subfield T, which are start and end periods. So for my example, I chose this because it honestly made me laugh. So this is for Leslie Knope, who already has a subfield C in her access point explaining that she is a fictitious character. But this does make sure in her 368 to explain, in case it wasn't already obvious, that she is a fictitious character. All right, next we have our 370, which is for associated place. This field is a place associated with the entity being established. For a person, this would be a place associated with a person's birth, death, residence, and/or identity. For a corporate body, this would entail a significant location associated with a corporate body. So location of a conference, location of the headquarters, or of an organization. For a family, this would be a place where the family resides or has resided or has some connection. So for this field, you have place of birth in subfield A, subfield B is place of death, associated country is in subfield C, place of residence or headquarters is in subfield E, and in subfield I, you have relationship information. There is also an option to use LCSH terms if those are applicable to the access point being established. If the term is not applicable, authorized as an LC NACO or LCSH, do not add a subfield 2 at the end of the field. So our example here is for John Keats. This shows that he was born in London and he died in Rome, Italy. So our next field is 371, or the address field. So an address, so this can include an electronic access information such as email, telephone, fax, TTY, or numbers, are associated with the entity described in the record. So different addresses such as physical addresses or email addresses are recorded in separate 371 fields. For a person, this would be the address of a person's place of residence, business, or employer, and/or an email address for a corporate body. This would be the address of the corporate body's headquarters or offices, or an email address for the body. The distinction between this field and the last field is that the 370 field contains information associated with the access point, while the 371 field contains contact information for the access point. Best practice for personal names: do not record an address for a living person. Supplying this field for a corporate body is cataloger's judgment if a subfield E is applied in the 370. The subfields for this are address in subfield A, city in subfield B, intermediate jurisdiction in subfield C, subfield D is country, subfield E is postal code, subfield M is electronic mail address. I looked for multiple examples and I just found one. So this is the mailing address for Ingram Content Group's main warehouse. And subfield A is the street address, subfield B is the city, subfield C is the state, and subfield E is the zip code. All right, so our next field is 372, or field of activity. For a person, this would be a field of endeavor, area of expertise in which the person is or was engaged. For a corporate body, this would be a field of business in which the corporate body is engaged, its area of competence. Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so for my example, we have the Art Institute of Chicago. Okay, so we're looking at their 372 here that's along the bottom. So we have art, study, and teaching, art, collectors and collecting, art exhibitions, and art history. So you notice they have one source code of LCSH. That's because all these terms are LCSH terms. So with NACO practice, you'll notice that they only have dashes in between the subdivisions. That's how NACO does this, instead of using the LCSH subfields of X, V, or Y. Okay. And our next field is 373, or associated group field, information about a group, institution, or association that is associated with the entity and the authorized access point. The field may include dates of affiliation. The field is repeated if the person has multiple affiliations for different time periods. The subfields for this are subfield A for associated group, and then other subfields as they may apply. The example above is for a hockey team in Grand Rapids, Michigan called the Grand Rapids Griffins. As you can see in the first 373 field, they had affiliation with the Ottawa Senators and NHL hockey team from 1996 in subfield S for start date until 1999 in subfield T for end period. The second 373 shows their current affiliation with the Detroit Red Wings, also an NHL team, which started in subfield S in 2002.
Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Right, our next field is 374, occupation. Information about a profession or occupation in which a person works or has worked may include dates applicable. The field is repeated if the person has multiple occupations for different time periods. The preference is to use controlled vocabulary in this field, such as LCDGT or mesh. Also, LCSH is an option. And the biggest subfield in this is for subfield A in occupation. Looking at our example of Oprah Winfrey, such as you can see, Oprah has worn many hats, and each of those is shown in the 374 field along the bottom. That includes actors, television talk show hosts, business people, motion picture producers and directors, and lastly, authors. This ends just like in our 372 in the LCSH. All right, and our next field is 375 for gender. So gender is a highly personal and sensitive attribute. As of April 15th, the PCC committee made a recommendation stating, do not record the RDA gender element in personal name authority records, deleting existing 375 fields when editing a record for any other reason. I do have an example because I created this presentation before April 15th. This is for Laverne Cox. Her gender is shown in multiple 375 fields. The second 375 field ends with a subfield 2 for showing that it's an LCSH terminology. If Laverne Cox's record is updated in any way per this new policy update, these 375 fields should be removed. Our next field is 376 field, or the family information field. Additional information about families, including type of family, prominent members of the family, and hereditary title. Preferred vocabulary is LCSH. The subfields for this include type of family, name of prominent member, and hereditary title. In our example for the Smith family, we have a couple of fields to look through. The type of family listed is families. Then we have listed the most prominent member of the family in a separate field. In subfield B, it's Smith, Laura Margaret Cole, and then 1806 to 1883, and subfield 2, NAF. Next, we have 377 field, or the associated language field. Codes for languages associated with the entity described in the record. This will include the language a person uses when writing, a language a corporate body uses in its communication, or language of a family. The preferred language terms for this field are from the MARC code list for languages, which are the 3-letter code you often find in the fixed fields and the 040 field in the body of a bibliographic record. You can also use another term if it is not provided on this list with the inclusion of a subfield L at the end of the field. The subfields for this are A, language code, and subfield L, language term. In our example, we have actress Marion Cotillard, who is a French actress, singer, and producer, and has acted in many films spoken in French and began acting in French cinema. Next, we have fuller form of name, or the 378 field. A name or names associated with a person that includes the fuller form of a part of any name represented only by an initial, abbreviation, or shortened or otherwise modified variant in the form chosen as the preferred name, and or a part of the name not included in the form chosen as the preferred name. This field only applies to the name and a 1XX field. Best practice is to code this field when the information is readily available, even if it is already present in the subfield Q in 1XX field. There are 3 subfields for this, which includes the subfield Q as well as the subfield U and V. As seen in the example, John Lennon's fuller form of name is his first name and middle name. Next, we have 380, or the form of work. This is a class or genre to which
work belongs. This may be used to differentiate a work from another work with the same title. Multiple forms of work from the same source of vocabulary may be recorded in the same field in several occurrences or subfield A form of work. The preferred vocabularies are LCSH, LCGFT, and MESH. When terms are not from controlled vocabulary, they should be singular. The following example shows the first volume of The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. As you can see, it is listed under novels and fantasy fiction in subfield A and ends with a source code of LCGFT in subfield 2. Next, we have 381 field, or the other distinguishing characteristics of work or expression field. Any characteristic that is not accommodated in a special field that serves to characterize a work or expression. Examples are an issuing body, arranged statement of music, version, or a geographic term. May be used to differentiate a work from another work with the same title. Record the RDA element place of origin or of work in a 370 field. The example I brought is from a collected works of Jane Austen in 2006, where the author, Karen Joy Fowler, wrote this introduction for the collection. Her contribution is shown in the 100 field in subfield S, and then as the sole information in subfield A for a 381 field. Next, we have 382, or medium of performance. The instrumental, vocal, and or other medium of performance for which a musical work was originally conceived or for which a musical expression is written or performed. Multiple mediums of performance from the same source vocabulary may be recorded in the same field in separate occurrences of subfields. The subfields for this are medium of performance, soloist, doubling instrument, number of ensembles of the same type, number of performers of the same medium, alternative medium of performance, total number of individuals performing alongside ensembles, total number of performers, and total number of ensembles. The example shown is for the song Ave Maria. As shown in the 382 field, the medium of performance is singer. The number of performers of the same medium is 4. The total number of performers is 4. And the source code is LCMPT, which is the preferred vocabulary from the Library of Congress medium of performance, the source of music. 383 is our next field, or numeric designation of musical work field. This is a serial number, opus number, or thematic index number assigned to a musical work by the composer, publisher, or musicologist. May be used to differentiate a musical work from another with the same title. Best practice is to encode this when available. The subfields for this are serial number, opus number, thematic index number, thematic index code, or publisher associated with opus number. The example is from a title by Mozart. As shown in subfield E, C is the thematic index number, and subfield D shows the thematic index code. Next, we have the 384 field, or the key field. This field shows the set of pitch relationships that establishes a single pitch as a tonal center for a musical work or expression. May be used to differentiate a musical work or expression from another with the same title. Best practice, encode when available for works. In case of doubt, do not encode. Do not encode for expressions. As shown in the Beethoven example, this particular opus is meant to be played in G major. Next, we have time period of creation, or the 388 field. The time period of creation or origin of work or expression, including aggregate works, or of the works or expression contained in an aggregation. For this field, you would usually just have a subfield A for the time period and a subfield 2 for the source code. You may just have a subfield A. In my example, we're looking at Jane Austen's Persuasion. which in the 388 was written in the 19th century in a subfield A and has a source code of LCSH in the subfield 2. All right, these next couple of slides are going to look at cross-references. A general rule about these cross-references: do not add references solely for automatic conflict detection and updating of bibliographic records. I'm going to do each slide with different fields as I believe they just serve different purposes. First, we have the 4XX field, which is a variant access point or a C reference. Some things to keep in mind with a 4XX. A cross-reference, 4XX, may conflict with a 4XX on another record. A 4XX should not normalize to the same form as a 1XX or a 5XX. Do not provide variants of variants. It is important to remember when adding a personal name to a bibliographic record, always use the 1XX form of a name, not the 4XX. You would need to make sure to have a reference in your 670 field for every variant you create. For examples, we see that Maya Angelou has Johnson, Marguerite with her birth date and death date, with the middle name Anne and Annie, and also the name Make, Maya Angelou as variant names. John Lennon has a version of his name with just an initial and a longer form in subfield Q, his married name attached, his full name with his middle name, his married name with a different variant, and lastly, his name in different languages. Okay, so 5XX field or C also reference must be in the same form as their corresponding authorized access points. When a person has two bibliographic identities and resources have been published under both identities, create name authority records for each name and link them with 5XX C also references. If a person has more than two identities, references are required in a 670 field. Corporate bodies, when the relationship between two corporate or geographic names is not directly sequential, or when information about the exact relationship is not known, make simple C also references between the related access points. When in doubt about usage of these references, read through the manual and the guidelines. The example is for a pseudonym of the author Eleanor Hibbert. This is for her pseudonym, Jean Pilati, which she wrote historical fiction under. Another pseudonym some of you might be familiar with is Victoria Holt. Next, we have the 667 field, or a non-public general note field. The 667 field is used to give information of permanent value and general interest to catalogers. This field has many notes that can be recorded here, but mainly records practical information about the use or status of the authorized access point. Also, this field can record a number of an undifferentiated NAR that previously covered the person and may be used to record that the record is a duplicate that has been reported for deletion. A final use is to record a former access point that is not suitable for use as a reference in the NAR. Looking at the examples, the first one is actually quite common. In personal names, if you have a common name such as Smith, John, often you'll find a 667 note with a note saying, this 1XX field cannot be used under RDA until this undifferentiated record has been handled following the guidelines in DCM Z1008/32. In other words, if you're creating a record for a personal name for someone called John Smith, it is best practice to try to find a way to differentiate the access point. This next example is something I've always been fascinated with. The record is for Michigan Avenue in Chicago. The 667 reads, this heading is not valid for use as a geographic subdivision. Again, this is a use note. If as a catalog you wanted to use this heading, you would have to use it in its current form. 670 field or sources found field. The 670 field is used to justify the authorized access point and the cross references in the name authority record. It may also contain further important information that is necessary to identify the person, corporate body, or work expression title, or information that can be used to clarify relationships between the entity and other entities in the file. At least one 670 is required in every authority record. Sometimes more than one 670 may need to be created to establish where a name was found or other elements within the record. In the NACO Participants Manual, there are instructions on citing points from the title to internet resources that are reference points. Formatting for this note is specific as well, and I'm going to show you that via an example. So my example at the bottom of the screen shows 670 fields for Jasmine Guillory. The first field verifies her name, and the second verifies that Guillory is an author, but also verifies the 370 in her record, which establishes that Guillory is in the United States. 672. Next is the 672 field, or the title related to entity field. The primary purpose of the 672 field is to document that there is a relationship between the 1XX entity and the title recorded in the 672 field. Use of this field does not negate the use of a 670 field, nor the use of it to justify a 1XX 4XX reference. Include subfield A for title and subfield B for the remainder of title, subfield S for date, and subfield W for a bibliographic record control number. In this example, there are some 672 fields for the record, from the record for Peter de Jong. As you can see, these titles include the full citation and include the OCLC DLC record where the title can be found. Okay. Next, we have the 673 field, or title not related to the entity field. The 673 field may be used to record a title that is not related to the entity represented by the 1XX field in the name authority record. For example, in a record for a person, this field can be used to record a title written by a person with a similar name. This field is created to display that there is a relationship between the 1XX field and the title in this field. So our example shows a book written by the authorized access point Carrie, Jacqueline with the Crossley baby. And then the Jacqueline Carey in our example, so Carrie, Jacqueline 1964, is actually most known for writing the fantasy series, the Kushiel series, which is started with the book shown in our slide. Next, we have the 675 field, or sources not found field. This records sources in which no information is found related in any manner to the entity represented by the authority record or related entities. This field is not repeatable, so cite all sources in this field that pertain. In the example, we have Who's Who in America, 1989 edition, with a second subfield A of Encyclopedia Britannica's 15th edition. Okay, so 678 field, or biographical or historical data field. When supplying biographical or historical data in a 678 field, construct the note in a concise but complete sentences, keeping in mind that the information will be used in public displays. So the example we have here is for President Abraham Lincoln, and we have a concise biography of him in our 678 field. Next, we have a 781 field, or an optional field that NACO participants may provide in name authority records for geographic names in the 151 access points. The 781 field indicates the correct form and Mark 21 coding for a geographic name when it is used as a geographic subdivision in a subject heading in a bibliographic record. In the first example, we have the correct form for Chicago, so Illinois, and then Chicago second. And then the second example is for New York City. So we have New York State and then New York second. All right, so NACO training. There may be some thoughts roaming around after all those fields. So not just anyone can create a name record. that was a misconception I had at one point. The most important component of being able to create these records is going through the NACO training. The purpose of training is to familiarize catalogers with all facets of creating different names, rules associated with record creation, standardization within records, history behind NACO and different fields, etc. As of the last training, there were 8 modules. Not all of those modules are required to complete the training, but are suggested, especially if you'll be working with any of the name categories, think family names. The training period is currently a month long. A library must also be a PCC member library in order to be eligible for NACO training. Personally, I felt it was extensive, but inordinately helpful. The fantastic thing is that even after you've completed the training, you still have access to the material. So if you have questions as you're creating a name, you can go back to the material and get a refresher. So lastly, I have a few examples of some full records. Okay, so this first example, we have the record on the left is Stephen King's authorized personal name record. You'll see at the blue mark kind of halfway down the record, we have his pseudonym of Richard Bachman. And then the record on the right is for his pseudonym, Richard Bachman. This record is lengthy because Stephen King only wrote 5 novels under this name. Interestingly, King fictionally killed off this character by cancer in 1985. Next, I kind of wanted to give you an example of some records that might be updated as a NACO participant. So none of the more obvious examples of sports stadiums showed up for me, like say, think Comiskey Park for you baseball fans. There are not a lot of corporate names for stadiums in OCLC, but in the upper right, we have AT&T Stadium. And in the first 410, you'll notice there's the former name, which used to be Cowboy Stadium. And then if we're looking at the lower right, we have Empower Field at Mile High. The second and third 410s will show you some former names as well for those. Okay, our next example is a title record for the Mona Lisa. As you can see with title examples that we saw earlier, we have first in the 100, the creator, which is Leonardo da Vinci. Then we have a T field for the Mona Lisa. We also have some 400 fields for some C references for what Mona Lisa may be called in other records. Okay, so this next example is for a family name. This is us for the Howard family, who are a noble family in England. This is particularly looking at generations of the family who had prominence in the 15th century, most of the 16th century. The prominent members are showed in 376 fields. And then you also have the last 376 fields shows different titles that the family may have held during that time period. Interestingly, the picture we have of the individual in the upper right corner is actually the 3rd Duke of Norfolk. His name is not shown in this record because his personal name record needs to be updated to RDA right now. So I believe that's why his record is not listed in the 376. Okay, and now I wanted to show you some examples of some record that's being done here at the CMC. We here at the CMC can and do create authority name records. Right now, there are 4 staff at the CMC who have completed NACO training. This first example here is for the Finance Committee of Lincoln Women's Club from Lincoln, Illinois. It was organized on July 7th, 1896. As you can see in the 678 field, but also in the 046 field in this record that's on the left-hand side. The image on the bottom right is where the club meets. This correct record was created by Dr. Pamela Thomas. Our next record here, this is a second example of our records, and this is a personal name record I actually created for the local author Mariah J. Tolson. She's a children's literature author from East St. Louis, Illinois. And then to finish off our examples, I have to put this in considering the name of our presentation. This is the title name record for Romeo and Juliet. As you can see in the 100 field, we have our title, we have 400s with C references, 670s explaining, and that's the record for Romeo and Juliet. And next we have some sources that I consulted. And then today on our call, we have Barb Scobie, Dr. Pamela Thomas, myself, Eric McKinney, Katie X, and Shelley Stone. Any questions?
Thanks, Mary. Hopefully I've allowed you to unmute yourselves if you'd like to ask a question, or you can post a question in the chat box. We do have a couple of questions / comments, so hang on, let me go back up. The first question, in your Art Institute slide, why don't they have an address other than Chicago? Can it be edited?
So if you are a NACO participant, you can edit it, as far as I understand.
Mm-hmm. And we don't know why it was created that way.
No, it would probably be set up that way by whoever created the record or who has edited it since then.
And then somebody asked if they can get a link to the recording when available. And yes, we always put the link, the recording link in the L2 event, which will happen either later today or early next week. Blake stated NAF updates are also very common for church denominational names.
Mm-hmm.
And then Katie asked, related to Catherine Howard, married to Henry VIII. She was referring to the Duke example.
Oh, yeah.
And then she said, fantastic presentation. My brain grew today. And then Esparrios also said, agreed, Katie, I always enjoy these presentations. And Barb said, great job, Mary. Angelie, I hope that's how you pronounce your name, says for the 370, 371 associated places or address, could you add a website or other internet content created?
Yes. And if you're doing it for an organization or an author, I think you could do that. You'd probably want to do that in the 371 field, I would assume, because the 370 field, it has more to do with location that they're associated with. So I would probably say if you had an author that had a website, you could probably put that in the 371. That's where I would put it.
And for they said for an example, John Green author.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would put that in the 371.
And Eric says, great job, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys have any questions, we still have time. Just want to give a little shout out. On May 19th, we just added a new online with the CMC. Our interns are going to be presenting Spilling the Tea with the CMC virtual internships. So whether or not you'd really want to be an intern with the CMC, or if maybe you're thinking about having interns, this might be a great presentation to listen to. It's in L2, so please log in there and register, because we'd like to have a nice group of attendants for that. And as always, we're looking for new topics to cover in the future. So if you have suggestions, you can put them in the chat box, or just email us, and I'll put our email in the chat. And does anybody else have any questions? And we always take the summers off, so we will not be presenting in June or July. So our May one will be the last one for this fiscal year. And then we'll start back up either in August or September. And just a reminder, the slides are already posted in L2. And then after the presentation, Mary will post the slides with the notes.